struggling. Dad brings son to hospital. Little boy points and says, "That's mommy, but she's the CEO millionaire." Rain lashed against the windows of Seattle General Hospital, a November storm echoing the turmoil in Daniel Reed's heart. It was 8:47 p.m. The emergency room was alive with hurried steps and hushed voices. Daniel, 35, a single dad and night shift taxi driver, held his 4-year-old son, Ben, tightly. Ben's small body was hot with fever, a bandage on his forehead from a fall down the stairs. Daniel's dark hair was messy, his eyes shadowed, but his grip was steady, a trace of his old life as a firefighter. "Stay with me, buddy," Daniel whispered, his voice rough yet gentle, weaving through the crowded waiting area. Ben, pale and drowsy, clung to his father's jacket, clutching a crumpled photo from Daniel's pocket. A woman in a navy coat hurried past, her blonde hair catching the light. Ben's eyes widened, and he pointed, trembling. "That's mommy," he shouted, his voice cutting through the hospital's buzz. Daniel froze, breath catching. He followed Ben's gaze to Isabella Moore, 31, a real estate CEO, standing in the hallway, heels clicking. Her face, framed by golden curls, paled as her green eyes met Daniel's. Their past crashed into them in a single look. "Ben, no," Daniel said, his voice cold. "Mommy's gone." "It's her," Ben insisted, waving the faded photo of Isabella smiling 5 years ago, her blonde hair bright. "I saw her in your picture, Daddy." Isabella's hand covered her mouth, tears welling. "Daniel," she whispered, stepping forward. Daniel's jaw tightened. He pulled Ben closer, turning away. "We don't need you," he muttered, words heavy with hurt, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. Ben twisted in his arms, still pointing. "Mommy's pretty like in the picture," he said, voice soft with hope. Daniel's heart clenched. He glanced back at Isabella, her eyes pleading, then looked away, her 4-year absence crushing him all over again. At the check-in desk, a nurse took their details. "He'll be seen soon," she said, noting Ben's flushed face. Daniel sank into a chair. Ben curled against him, still holding the worn photo. All he had of Isabella, who'd left when Ben was a newborn, pushed by her family to chase a better life. Daniel, once a firefighter who braved flames, now drove taxis to survive, raising Ben alone. "Is mommy coming back?" Ben asked, his voice piercing. Daniel's throat tightened. He wiped a tear from Ben's cheek, his thumb gentle. "Just you and me, buddy," he whispered, a promise that softened the nurse's eyes. Isabella lingered in the hallway, aching to hold Ben, but Daniel's stare stopped her. She was a CEO now, her name on skyscrapers, but guilt from abandoning them remained. A flood in Indonesia had stranded her, stripping everything but her will to survive. In the hospital's sterile light, she felt like the scared girl who'd left her family. Daniel carried Ben to the exam room as a nurse called them. He didn't look back, but the photo burned in his mind. Isabella's smile, a memory he couldn't release. The rain fell harder, drumming the windows, mirroring his inner storm. Ben's shout, "That's mommy," echoed in Isabella's ears. She stood frozen, knowing she couldn't escape the past. Leaving the years of raising Ben alone still lingered. Ben, nestled in Isabella's arms, looked up at her. "Daddy's a superhero," he said, his voice bright despite his tiredness. "He saved people and fires. Did you know that, mommy?" Isabella's eyes widened, her gaze shifting to Daniel. She remembered the young firefighter she'd fallen in love with, brave and selfless, and realized he was still that man. "I know, Ben," she said softly, her voice full of awe. "Your daddy's always been a hero." Daniel's throat tightened, his hand still holding hers. He saw the way Isabella looked at him, not as a CEO seeing a struggling driver, but as the woman who'd once known his heart. The room felt smaller, the air charged with unspoken possibilities. The first light of dawn crept through the hospital window, painting the walls with a soft golden glow. It bathed Daniel, Isabella, and Ben in warmth, a quiet promise of healing beginning to take root. Isabella brushed a tear from Ben's cheek, her fingers lingering as she looked at Daniel. He didn't pull away. His grip on her hand tightened, just enough to say he wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. The late afternoon sun filtered through the worn curtains of Daniel Reed's small Seattle apartment, casting a warm glow over the cluttered living room. Daniel, 35, sat on the couch, his legs still in a cast from the taxi accident, a crutch propped beside him. The air smelled of pizza and cake, and laughter filled the space as a handful of neighborhood kids ran around, their paper superhero masks flapping. Isabella Moore, her blonde hair tied back in a messy bun, knelt on the floor, helping Ben, now 5, pin a makeshift cape to his shirt. She'd transformed the apartment into a superhero headquarters for his birthday, with streamers and balloons taped to the walls. Daniel watched Isabella, his eyes tracing the way she laughed with Ben, her CEO polish replaced by a genuine warmth. She's not just a CEO, he thought, his heart softening. She's Ben's mom. The realization hit him hard, mingling with memories of their past love and the pain of her absence. He wanted to believe she'd stay, that they could be a family, but the scars of 4 years lingered. Isabella glanced at Daniel, her green eyes catching the light. She smiled, but inside, she wrestled with doubt. Can I really be their family? She thought. After everything I've done, do I deserve this? She'd spent the week caring for Daniel and Ben, cooking meals, reading bedtime stories, trying to prove she was here for good. But every time Daniel looked at her, she wondered if he'd ever trust her again. Ben bounded over, holding a string of plastic beads he'd strung together with a broken toy piece. "Daddy, give this to Mommy," he said, his voice bright. Daniel hesitated, then took the makeshift bracelet, his fingers brushing Ben's. He hobbled over to Isabella, who was stacking paper plates, and held it out. "Ben wants you to wear this," he said, his voice low and warm. "He says it's for his favorite hero." Isabella's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she slipped the bracelet on. She hugged it to her chest, tears pricking her eyes, and looked at Daniel. "Thank you," she whispered, the gesture touching her deeply, a sign he was letting her in. The party grew louder, kids shouting as they played. Superhero rescue. Ben grabbed Isabella's hand, then Daniel's, pulling them into the game. "You're the heroes. Save the world," he declared, giggling as he handed them toy shields. Isabella pretended to fend off an imaginary villain while Daniel, despite his cast, swung Ben onto his shoulders, making him laugh. The room filled with their shared joy, the sound wrapping around them like a promise. As the kids ate cake, Ben climbed onto Isabella's lap, his small hands sticky with frosting. "Mommy," he said, the words slipping out naturally. "Stay with me and Daddy forever." The room seemed to still. Isabella's eyes widened, tears spilling over as she hugged him tightly. Daniel, sitting nearby, felt his heart lurch. He met Isabella's gaze, and for the first time, he smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "I want that too, buddy," he said softly, his voice steady but full of emotion. The words hung in the air, a bridge between their fractured past and a hopeful future. Isabella's heart raced. She wanted to tell Daniel she loved him, that she'd always loved him, but she held back, waiting for him to be ready. Daniel felt his walls crumbling, the love he'd buried for years rising to the surface. He looked at Isabella, her blonde hair glowing in the fading light, and saw the woman he'd never stopped loving, now fighting to be part of their lives. Then, oblivious to the weight of the moment, tugged them both into another game. "Superheroes save the world together," he shouted, leading them in a clumsy march around the room. Daniel and Isabella laughed, their hands brushing as they followed him, their shared glances full of unspoken promises.